Okay, so it's HVAC Artisan here. We're going to check out a building that's from 1893. The building right behind me here was built 1893. The building has been used as a plumbing shop for over 120 years. And it's been closed for a number of years, no longer in use, but there's still a lot of cool relics from its days as a plumbing shop. So we're gonna go check it out. You can see they got the pipe rack over here. This threader here can thread from 2.5 to 4-inch pipe, powered by that mule there that you see. Now this bench, I was told, was built in the early 1900s during the Great Depression. This bench was built, it was a project for one of the apprentices, and they were hired and they were told their first task was to build this workbench. So it was sort of a test for them to see how well they could do, if they were worth their salt, so to speak, as an apprentice. If they could handle creating something like that, that meant that they were probably, you know, going to be a good worker. So that was the intention when the boss gave them that job, that task of creating that workbench. This is their grinder. This grinder, notice belt drive, no guards. This probably would have been where they would clean off fittings to reuse them. Since it's got wire brushes on both sides, is probably what they use that for. Here you see, for a grinder right here, there's a light right on the wall to illuminate. Every individual bench has their own lights, own lighting. Take for instance this bench here. Here we got, it's just a piece of 1/2-inch pipe bent over, transitioned to a light fixture. So when you were working on the workbench, you had your source of light to use. This work cart is pretty cool. You see it has wheels that spin, rotate, and then it has these outriggers on the bottom. And so these outriggers, when this handle is engaged, it raises the cart up and it rests on these outriggers, not on just the wheels anymore. Back here as we check out the massive workbench, you can see this is where a lot of the pipe threading and stuff like that took place. Here, the owner has laid out a lot of the cool old taps and dies. Back in the day when the shop was operational, if you were taking apart fittings and there were issues with the threads, if it was a rusty bolt, you would go out to the truck and grab your tap and you would chase the threads to clean them off, clean the rust off, straighten them out so that you could thread it back together. There wasn't a hardware store around the corner that had bolts for you to go grab and reuse and replace. So you had to be able to clean them up to reuse them. Here you got your roller that would line up with the vise on the end of the table there, and so you could have your length of pipe running out across the table. This roller lifts out of the socket on the floor, and that would have supported some of their other pipe for their probably rigid 300 machine, something like that, that they would have had mounted down there towards that end of the bench. Here's some of the old threading stuff. All this stuff, rigid stuff, still good. This stuff will last another 100 years of use. Thread and pipe, assembly and disassembly of fittings out of it. This was a scale that they would use for weighing their scrap when they would bring it in. It was a Fairbanks scale. So the son of the owner of the building told me that on their 3-foot wrenches, these rings that they have welded on, that's not just to hang the wrenches, but that was actually a functional thing that was done. So they were disassembling. They were one of the only contractors in Walworth County that would do steam boilers back in the day. And these rings that they put on their wrenches and welded on there were so that if they had a fitting that was particularly difficult or hard for them to disconnect, they could put the pipe wrenches in opposing position and they could put a come along between the two rings on the pipe wrenches. So if they didn't have the muscle, if their guy in the field didn't have the muscle to break joint loose himself, he could use a mechanical means, add a come along, and be able to use the come along to create extra tension and break that fitting loose. So it's a pretty cool idea. I've never seen that done. I've never heard of that being done, but there's a possibility I might have to use that on a job at some point in time. So I thought it was pretty interesting to hear that idea. Pretty cool to see a building built where every space was utilized and everything was made from what was available, what was on hand, nothing was wasted. So totally different era that we would see. So behind me here, you see all these fitting shelves. The whole basement, the whole rest of the basement is full of these fitting shelves. So, you know, all their fittings would have been organized. Nipples behind me here from 1/4 inch all the way up to 1 inch. And then you can see all their fittings would have been organized and sorted all throughout the basement here. You know, going all the way back, multiple rows of shelves for them to keep their fittings organized. So they had everything on hand. This was a time before lean principles where you relied on your local supply house to keep everything in stock. Well, somebody put a lot of time into keeping everything organized, keeping everything sorted, labeled, and ordered, all that stuff. So another cool thing we see over here, the shop sink. And so when it came time to dry their hands, I've never seen a dryer this old. This thing is still porcelain. It's cast iron with the porcelain coating, similar to an old clawfoot bathtub. So let's see if this still works. So look at that, it's even getting warm, even putting out heat. Over here, you can see someone's been in here checking on the system because they have their backdraft draft indicator sitting down here on the shelf. That's an old school one. Bakelite plastic. That thing's been around for a long time, but obviously still functional. Then we see back in the era that this shop was operational, they did a lot heavier. Pumps were heavier. Piping was heavier, and steam systems in general. I mean, they would have to break cast iron boilers apart to be able to install them and fit them back together. So there's a whole bunch of pulleys and come-alongs and, you know, rigging they would have used for lifting and positioning and installing systems, all kinds of stuff. Quite the systems for rigging up equipment and putting it all in place. Old rotary phone on the wall. No dial tone. So this table here is pretty cool. But you can see here again, there's an individual light for everything that needed to be done. So you had your single light bulb there for when you were working. Okay, so we're gonna come upstairs and check it out up here. Just the details, shelves. I mean, these are pretty cool. You look at the shelves. Somebody took time, cut down a piece of wire mesh, and individually stapled it all on there just to keep stuff from falling off the shelves on the stairway. I mean, that's pretty cool. But utilized every space in the building. This is pretty cool too. So in the stairway, this is the first aid kit. Old wooden first aid kit. Look at those shelf brackets. Even just those shelf brackets for this stuff. Well, this is the front street view out the front windows. That would have been the main entrance where customers could come in. Richard A. Carlson, Plumbing and Heating. This would have been the main office back here. You'd see all the shelves. Somebody custom made those for keeping all their paperwork, manuals, stuff like that organized. So this is walking into the back side of the shop. But at one point in time, this was where their timesheets were kept. Other paperwork down there. And then they had, this would have been for the pens and pencils. Phone jack right in the wall back here behind it. So that would have been, this would have been the phone station. So guys would come in at the end of the day, they had their paperwork there, they would take their timesheets. There was a slot back here in the cabinet, and then that was hinged so that this back part could be lifted up and the boss could pick up their timesheets at the end of the week to record their time. But you can tell it's a plumbing shop when the light's mounted on a old shower head that's been repurposed to support the light fixture. You can see this is an old brood boiler. Check that thing out. They totally redid that, gutted it, or stripped it down, restored it. That's pretty cool. All these hooks up here, those would have been for V-belts back when a lot of stuff was all belt drive. So that would have been V-belts all along there. And then up here on the ceiling, this would have been all V-belts that would have hung up there. And then you can see here, these shelves, how they were all laid out and organized pretty high off the floor, 12 feet up. So what they did was, at one point in time, the owner of the building, the father of the gentleman that I spoke with, purchased this ladder from a hardware store, from an Ace Hardware in Chicago. So this ladder operated on a track up on the ceiling and could roll back and forth to access the contents of the shelves. So that's pretty neat. Check out this old workbench. All these shelves, drawers. Drawers are full of tools. Well, some of them are. And then metal top. That workbench. See, it's a bent piece of metal. Old cast iron workbench legs. That's awesome. Doubled up 2x4s, and then the metal top laying across it all. Old kit back here. Deep count water tester kit. That's cool. Check out this old B&G service kit. It's a heavy duty toolbox full of B&G service parts. Check this out. This is the back rack Firelight test kit. The other part of this we saw downstairs. Sitting on the boiler, the draft portion would have fit right in there. But I don't even know how to work one of those. I don't know how you test that, but that's efficiency finder. for measuring your combustion. Before we had digital combustion analyzers, that's how you would have done it. So back here, this is the door to their tool room. So look at that. Blade selection chart. It's a Malco blade selection chart. Man, look at that saw. That thing's old school. You ever seen one of these before? That's for measuring V-belts. It's been a long time since anybody was using brass. Now everything's oil rub bronze. Before that it was brushed nickel. Trig slide rules. Doing calculations before you had calculators. These are pretty cool. I've never seen these before. These are stencils that they slide together to attach to one another. So you could put them together in whatever orientation you wanted to spell out words and then trace them or spray paint over them to label items. There's an old picture of the building. So check this out. This is what the building looked like way back in the day. Back in 1902. Back when they were headed out to do plumbing, doing steam and gas fitting with a horse and buggy. And we complained about not having a big enough work van or having to work out of a truck instead of a van or a van instead of a truck.